Next to speak is Mr. Kirk Reese. He is across the border ×2 from Ohio. Got his bachelor's and master's at the Ohio State University. Has been with Pioneer for 23 years, not 24 he said, so just 23. And he is the research agronomy manager. So he covers a good chunk of Illinois, and he's going to be speaking a little bit about accelerated genetics. So if you would, Mr. Kirk Reese.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Can you all hear me okay? Hear me back? Okay, very good. Well, good morning, everyone. So my fear has come true in that I had to follow Dr. Bolge. And I've got a slide up here that is going to be contradictory to what he just said. So let's move on here. Yeah, like Tony said, I'm from Ohio, and Ohio has way more soybeans than we do corn. I love soybeans. I like talking about soybeans. I would suspect you do too, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So let's talk about soybeans. The overview. So meeting the global challenge. I'm not going to yell, but there's a slide here that I wanted to draw your attention to, and it kind of relates to what Dr. Bolge just finished talking about. And thankfully he's had to leave and go back to campus. And then productivity, we talk about productivity all the time, but has it really improved? Has it really not? So I get this question all the time. Kirk, what's the deal? I raised 50 bushel beans in 1979. I raised 50 bushel beans now. What's up with that? So, environment types in Illinois, we'll talk about what we talk about internally in terms of environmental classification and how that relates to soybeans and solar radiation specifically, and why that matters, how you can leverage it, pushing some easy buttons on the farm to try to enhance our soybean yield without a lot of pain, and then some things that we do within our organization. I imagine if you talk to any seed business, they've got some kind of thing going on where they're trying to accelerate genetic gain in soybeans. I'm going to talk about ours specifically, and we call that AYT 4.0, and we're excited enough about it that we're going to launch a different brand name series for them. And the last thing is, and this doesn't affect Illinois in a large extent now, I would suspect it will in the future, but talking about end use for soybeans, especially in the oil market. What does that profile look like going forward? So here's the graph I was concerned about, because Dr. Bolge just told you animal protein and money matters. But the other thing is that we also recognize that world population is going up, arable land's going down, so we create this void that we call it the green revolution. Some of us call it virtual acres. In other words, how do you get more out of an acre of land than you did the year before? Because accelerating that yield gain is going to have to be pretty substantial if we're going to keep up. And whether it's direct consumption or animal protein consumption, that graphic really isn't going to change anytime soon. So, sustainably grow more food for more people using less land. Okay? That's why we do what we do, and talk about the more specifics here. Is there really productivity in soybeans? I'm an agronomist, okay? So I get really aggravated when I see these corn versus soybean graphs, because that's like comparing a Buick to a BMW. Buicks are good cars, comfortable. BMWs are faster and they're sportier. So corn and soybeans are kind of like, I think about in the same way. So if you did it on a per bushel basis, yeah, corn is accelerating at a faster pace than soybeans are, because corn is a grass crop. It's a C4 plant. You can get a lot of heterosis or hybrid vigor out of it, and you can get a lot of yield gain as a result. Soybeans are not. Different crop completely, we all know that, but on a percentage basis, corn and soybeans generally keep pace with each other on a percentage basis over a period of years. And this period of years right here is from 1985 to 2015. So a 30-year period, corn and soybeans yields genetic gain nationally, this is US, 143%, 141% for soybeans. So they're pretty close together on a percentage basis. So we are keeping pace on genetic gain. Now, the other thing we like to talk about is if I was a breeder, soybean breeder, I would take all the credit for this. Okay? But I'm not a breeder, I'm an agronomist. And I go to the breeder and I say, no, you cannot take all the credit for this because you guys adapt innovations, technologies, equipment, seed treatments, planting, maturity, herbicide resistance, better weed control, and implement those. So what we do is we compromise. If the breeder's in a room, we say, okay, you get 51% of the credit, we'll take 49. When we got all the agronomists in the room and said, we're going to take 51% and we're going to give the breeders 49%. So, you know, we got a friendly competition there. Generally say about half of it's management and half of it's just through classical breeding techniques. But bottom line is, we are seeing this. The challenge is going to be is to get those slopes to trend up at a faster rate than what they're currently doing right now. Because at this pace, we're not going to be able to keep up on demand long term. Let's talk a little bit about what I was referring to as environmental classification. So internally we call this N class. There's a lot of colors on that map. This is US and North America by and large, US and Canada. And we don't want to read into this too much other than to look at the state of Illinois. The bottom line is Illinois is a great place to grow soybeans. And the reason we say that is because in this green color that we have in the map in Illinois, for most, especially central and northern Illinois, is we call that a temperate environment. Temperate environment meaning generally low levels of what we call abiotic stresses. Abiotic stresses are relative humidity, solar radiation, precipitation, temperature. We got the prairie soils, we got the timber soils. We are generally a pretty good spot to grow soybeans in. Southern Illinois, you know, patently obvious statement, water is wet statement. It's warmer and a little drier in southern Illinois than it is in central and northern Illinois. So we call that a temperate dry environment. It's a little drier, a little warmer, and then soybeans tend to respond to that. The reason that's important is because the way we're set up is we look at these environmental classifications and say, where do we put our breeding efforts? And can we hit these environment types to make sure that we're growing or developing soybeans to manage those? This is over a 50-year period of time, and you know, we take those averages and we do something we call a population of environments, and then we generate this map. And then we look at them for each year individually. So why 2016? Here's 1 year. The reason I brought up 2016's map and compared to the 50-year average is because 2016, we got as close to the 50-year average as any year I've ever seen. And like Tony said, I've been around for a while. So we consider the growing environment in 2016 in Illinois to be as close to ideal as we've seen for quite some time. How do I know that? Because if I look at other contrasting years, anybody remember 2014? What happened in 2014? It was wet, it was cold. I've never seen soybeans that color before, some fields, you know. So the purple that you see in Illinois, northern Illinois in particular, is an environment that we would typically classify more in Michigan or Wisconsin. So it's a little cooler, a little less sunlight. That's okay, but soybeans are very dependent on solar radiation. I'm going to talk a little bit why that's important here in a little while. But you guys remember what that happens. And it has a domino effect too, because when you get into southern Illinois, you're seeing environments that you would have saw further north, on average, whatever average is. Okay? Compare that to 2012. Everybody remembers 2012. It was hot, it was dry, and it shows up on this environment map. With the exception of maybe some northern tiers of counties in northern Illinois, most of Illinois was pretty hot, pretty dry. And I remember that. I made the critical mistake of painting my garage in July of 2012. I took a week of vacation to do that. It never dropped below 100 degrees in the day. I about died. It was the dumbest mistake I ever made. So it was, but by and large, you know, we've got, even though we have adequate solar radiation, we still have a problem with heat, still have a problem with dry weather or even drought in some cases, and soybeans will react to that. So we just got to make sure that whatever environment we're in, when you talk about soybean development and you talk about soybean breeding, you talk about soybean management, we've got to tick on all these environments pretty closely. You can't have a lot of variation in that genetic gain, because you know, if you see these big wide swings in yield from one farm or one field to the next, we're in trouble, because variability for us is a bad thing. So what do we do to make sure that we're doing the things that we say we're going to do? Once we get past the breeding program, and in Illinois we have 3 breeding stations: in Princeton, Champaign, and Mascoutah. So what you're seeing here is a map of Illinois, and it's segregated by maturity groups, from mid-group 2 in the north to mid-group 4 in the south. And what we try to do with our on-farm trial network, what we call PKP, among other things, is we try to represent those maturity groups, and we do a fairly good job of doing that. So we have 480 locations in Illinois. That's a lot. But it's required for us to make sure that we're capturing all those growing environments, hitting all those maturity groups, to make sure that we're making the right decisions when we launch a product and to grow on your farm. It's very, very critical to do that. Okay? Why do I care so much about sunlight? Okay? This graphic, I don't want you to read too much into it, but on the x-axis below is what we call the deviation in solar radiation, and that's a quantum we call millijoules. Okay, that's what the MJ is for. If you look at the blue bars, that's 2015. The red bars are 2016. Remember what I said about 2016? It was as close to ideal as you can get in terms of a growing environment for soybeans that we've seen for quite some time. And that was reflected in yield advantage. At the top of the chart there, you see that we have a 2 bushel yield advantage, 72 bushels. This is our plots, not the state average, okay, versus 70 in 2015. Now, there's a lot that goes into that yield, but I'm making the case here that solar radiation had a lot to do with it, because over in 2016, not only were we spot on the 10-year average for solar radiation capture, we were a little bit above it, we were a little bit below it, and that is perfect. It's almost perfect in terms of sunlight capture for a soybean crop. You don't want to be so far above, because what happens? 2012 happens, right? You don't want to be too far below like we are in 2015, because what happens? 2014 happens, okay? So we had a really, really good solar radiation capture. It's important for soybeans. I'll explain why here in a little bit. So you're probably saying, hey Kirk, I have no ability to control sunlight whatsoever on my farm, outside of a shade cloth if I'm a tobacco grower or something. So what can I do to influence light, or manipulate light to influence yield? Well, the easy button is this: adjust planting date and soybean maturity. Not hard to do. Why? I want to harvest more light prior to the onset of reproductive development. In other words, I want as much vegetative growth in my soybeans as I can before I hit that first flower stage. When do I hit the first flower stage in soybeans? Generally, after summer solstice. Why? Because the days get shorter. Days get shorter, triggers soybeans to start flowering, and away we go. The other reason? Because I planted early, I can potentially avoid July and August a little bit better than I could have if I planned later. And I run into those periods in July of August, extreme heat, drought stress, those kind of things. Okay? What's that look like? So I took those same 480 locations in 2015 and 2016, and I broke them out by planting date. One thing you'll notice right away and why soil radiation matters is the blue lines on the left are 2015 planting dates from mid-April to early June or mid-June. The one thing you notice right away, look at those top blue and red bars. Which one's lower? 2015, the blue, right. By about 13 to 16 bushels per acre as a starting point. That's a lot of beans. They both trend down. 2015 is trending down at a faster rate than 2016 is. Why is that? Because we had some more solar radiation capture in 2016 than we did in 2015. Okay, follow that? So the ability to capture more solar radiation is potentially there the earlier we can get the beans in the ground. Okay, follow that logic? Okay. What's that mean in terms of maturity groups of soybeans? So this is something the guys did in Illinois and Indiana back in 2012 and 2013. So what we did was we took a set of varieties and they're one maturity group apart. So if it was a 2.5 it's normally planted there, the 3.5 is one maturity group later than that. Okay? And then we had two different distinct planting dates. We called one early and we called one normal, and those are generally about 10 days to 2 weeks apart from each other. But look what happens when you take the full season variety in the yellow bar and compare it to the earlier variety in the blue bar. If you plant a full season bean earlier, in this trial, over 2 years, we had more than a 7 bushel yield advantage for the full season variety. And this is encompassing across the entire state, not just a particular location like eastern Illinois or northern Indiana. Okay, this is a lot of locations. Even when we get to what we call a more normal planting date, in other words, a full season soybean crop that's planted, early to mid-May, we still realize about a 2.5 bushel yield advantage for the full season variety, even later season. So the first lever, maturity group. Second lever, can I get my beans in the ground earlier than I normally would? And that's how we capture solar radiation. Okay? How do I do that? So I'm switching gears on you here a little bit. This is a study that we did in Pennsylvania. I covered Pennsylvania too in 2015. And we said, okay, this is a little bit different metric. This is growing degree units or heat unit accumulation. And what happens to soybeans when they are exposed to those by planting date? So there's a little bit complex slide up here, but over on the top left is early maturity groups, and that's about mid-2 to mid-3 maturities. And over on the right, we're calling late maturity groups. That's about mid-group 3 to mid-group 4. Okay? What's going on? The blue bars in the blue chart below is how many GDUs are accumulated in that soybean plant from planting to the first flower. So all the vegetative growth in the soybean, how many GDUs am I collecting? No matter what the maturity was, no matter what the planting date is, it's pretty static. They all accumulate at the same rate up until they start reproducing. First flower. R1 is what? The first flower, the first fully developed node on the soybean plant. Okay? The difference is when I get past first flower and now I'm moving through all those reproductive stages in the pod fill, what's going on? In mid-April, in both early and late maturity groups, is where we had the highest accumulation of growing degree unit accumulation in that field. What it does is it provides the opportunity, notice I didn't say guarantee, I said the opportunity to realize greater yield because I captured more heat units. And heat units in this case can be related to some extent with solar radiation as well. So reproductive stage matters. And get all the way to early July, mid-July, that range in GDU accumulation is about 600 to 700 GDUs. In the vegetative stages, it's pretty static. It's less than 100 GDU range. That's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about when am I going to plant soybeans, when am I going to plant corn, can I do them both at the same time? You know, and of course as an agronomist, I'm going to caveat everything. Soils have to be fit, soil temperature's got to be right, put a seed treatment on, you know, that kind of stuff, okay? I'm going to switch gears here on you a little bit. So this is right off our pipeline side in Pioneer, and this is a roadmap of soybean product development that we've been on, a journey we've been on. We've been selling soybeans since 1970. In soybean years, that's not a very long time. So when we bought Peterson Soybean Seed Company back in 1970, we got started. And then I'm not going to read all this stuff to you, but I want you to, with the take home here, I want you to understand is it takes a lot of investment to move the needle on soybean product development and yield. And these are all the things that we do, you know, from trait integration, market assisted selection, impact trials, we're doing it all. And the other thing is, you notice the arrow doesn't plateau, it keeps moving up. So our R&D investment continues to grow. And you know, right now we're ticking off about $2 million a day on research and development of our product lines in corn and soybeans. What's that mean for us? From a marketing perspective, which you'll start to see if you're a Pioneer customer, or I hope you will become one. If you're not in the future, is something we call the A series. So those of you who've grown Pioneer soybeans in the past, you know, we had the Bs, and then we had the Ms, and now we have the Ts, and now we're moving to the As. And the reason we're moving to the As is because we are employing all those technologies that just showed you on that pipeline and realizing the fruits of that labor. So we felt like in order to differentiate the soybean product line, we needed to rename the series that comes with it. So we call it the A series. What's that mean for us? It means we're seeing about a 2.3 bushel per acre advantage, over 10,000 comparisons. That's a lot of comparisons. And this is against competitive checks. So everything except Pioneer. And you know, when we test against our competitors, we usually want to test against the best things that are out there. So we're feeling pretty good about where we're sitting right now in terms of what that genetic gain looks like and what AYT 4.0 brings to that. What's AYT 4.0 exactly? And I don't expect you to read this, you can't read it anyway. Let's pretend I'm a soybean breeder. And let's say I've got 50,000 lines out in the field, and I got to decide which ones are going to make the cut. So I got to cut 90% of those. So I've got 50,000, I got to get it down to 5,000. I got to do it this year. In the past, what I would have to do is I'd have to go find a field that had cis nematode in it, or I'd have to find a field that has brown stem rot in it, or I'd have to find a field that has a history of sudden death syndrome and hope I'd get a hit. So I can start to cull out all those varieties that are susceptible to trait of interest. My experience in doing a lot of work in agronomy research over a period of years is if you want to solve a problem in a guy's field, put a plot there. It'll go away. All right? It will go away, trust me. So what will we do now? So you see that genome map up there. Let's take those same 50,000 lines. I'm a soybean breeder. And now I can look at those 50,000 lines and say, okay, that one's got cyst, that one's got brown stem rot, that one's got a phytophthora gene, that one's got 2 or 3 of all the above, and I know in advance what they have and what they don't. And what I can do is my cycle times go up rapidly. In fact, with this AYT system, we cut our cycle times of soybean product development in half. It used to be about a 15-year cycle time from initial cross to commercialization. Now it's about 6 or 7 years. And our intent is to get that down even further. 3 or 4 would be ideal. But for a self-pollinated crop, that's what it takes. You got to spend that amount of time evaluating soybeans. So the things that you're going to see 6 or 7 years from now are sitting in a nursery today. Okay? That's AYT. That's all it means. The last thing is a model. I wanted to use this as an illustrative example of why that's important. So where I come from in Ohio, we sell a brand of soybeans called Plenish. Plenish is just a trade name for a soybean that has an elevated level of oleic acid in the oil profile. Why do I care? If you have looked at a bag of your favorite potato chips lately, let's pretend I got a bag of Lay's potato chips up here. What does it say in big red letters on the front of the bag? Lay's, okay, I deserve that, thank you. 0 grams trans fat, yes, and Lay's. Yeah. It better say Lay's. Why is that important? Because it's consumer-driven end use. The soybean oil market, if you have commodity soybean oil as it exists today, has to go through a process called partial dehydrogenation. When you partially hydrogenize soybean oil, that's good because it stabilizes the oil and it has a longer shelf life. That's bad because when you do that, it is loaded with trans fats. And as a result, substitutes come in the market. Canola oil, sunflower oil, palm oil. Remember I said Illinois is a great state to grow soybeans in. We want to keep it that way. So in order to compete with those alternative oils on the market, we introduced a transgenic that does the same thing. So soybean oil now has 0 grams trans fat when you cook something in it. McDonald's wants it, KFC wants it, Nestle already uses it. There's lots of end user demand for this type of profile. So this is where the oil market is heading in soybeans. And by the way, that also helps us regain market share in that oil market. And hopefully we can rebound in commodity prices as well. So that's part of the reason we do that. The other reason I put this up here is because what happens when you put a transgene, in other words, a genetic code from a foreign substance into a soybean plant, what happens to the yield of that soybean plant usually? It goes down. It goes down a lot. You have to breed out all that baggage that came along with it and try to figure out how to get it back. With Plenish, and because we employ the technologies that we do, we don't see any difference between Plenish and our elite lines in yield. That's the difference. That's what we got to look forward to. So those are things that are very important, meaning consumer end use with a healthy oil profile and getting something in soybeans that really matter. And this is going to hit Illinois at some point. I don't know when, but I'm pretty sure it will. If not this year, maybe next year or 19. But it will get here eventually as a contract type of approach. Okay? So, in summary, we still got this challenge in front of us. We've got to create more on less land. Okay? Genetic gain is dependent on how much money we spend. Just being straight up. More money we have, more investment we can make, and better off we're going to be in the long run in the product line in terms of genetic gain. I'm Ohio. I am totally envious every time I come to Illinois at how great of soils you guys have compared to what we got. You know, it's awesome. I can't believe it. But Illinois is a great state to produce soybeans. Don't forget about that solar radiation piece. That is very, very important to soybean yield. And remember those levers you can pull: maturity group, planting date. Okay, and went into the physiological reasons why. What you can expect from us is that we're going to continue to innovate the soybean product line, and AYT, that thing is just is the latest tool in the toolbox. There will be more after that. Okay? Plenish is just an illustrative model of what that effort looks like. So those are the things to try to paint a picture, a vision of where the soybean product line is going. Okay? With that, I know my time's up. Pretty close. Thank you for your time and attention. Gail, do we have time for questions? Or?
Sure, yeah.
No.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dan?
Kirk, this AYT process floor you talked about used to be 15 years, now you got 7, now you're going to 45. Does that mean a new variety every year? What's that going to change in the marketplace with how fast varieties are coming and disappearing?
I don't know that the number of varieties will change appreciably to commercialization, Dan. Downstream, it'll change dramatically. Because, you know, we got a germplasm pool, okay? And, you know, I was using that example of 50,000 lines. That might be 500,000 in the future. But the culling rates are not going to change. They'll probably be more aggressive. What that means is it's a numbers game at that point. So you got 500,000 to pick from. You got that much better opportunity to pick a much better variety than you could if you only had 50,000 lines to work from. That's the difference. But commercialization-wise, I don't see that changing much. Farmers, you know, I get that all the time. They're too fast. You're moving too fast. You know, I like the variety I got. What's wrong with you? You know, we don't want to disrupt that. In fact, we want to stabilize it out a little bit, if anything.
Does that AYT4 mean maturity rate? Grade 4?
No, sir. All that meant was, the question is that AYT a maturity group? And no, it means there was a 1, 2, 3, and now there's 4, and that's what that means. So, no problem.
Any more questions?
You know, I could run that fast. With the Plenish, are we waiting for processing to come to our local area to make it affordable to grow them and get the premium?
Yes, that's a good question, and there's two things going on. One is having a collection point that you can go to that will take them. There is some talk about Southern Illinois being a sourcing location for a plant, a Bunge location in Alabama. So there's some transport issues there. Probably the bigger thing for Illinois right now is Plenish isn't approved in all export markets. So we don't want to get too far in front of our headlights on exporting something that is not approved somewhere. That's probably the biggest hang up right now. But we expect, you know, those regulatory approvals will come along.
Eric, another question. This about the solar radiation and maturity group. So, would you suggest that if you're doing an April 15 planting date, you up your maturity 1 unit, and if you like out in May, you stay with the conventional? Do you have a recommendation for that in Illinois today?
We do. I chose not to get in that level of detail, Dan. Actually, there's a guy named Jacob Vossenkemper who was a graduate student with Emerson in Illinois who did a lot of work on that. And he's probably got the best information that I know of for Illinois specifically in terms of what those maturity group, that sweet spot is, depending on where you're at in Central. Now, the limiting factor with Jake's data is he concentrated his efforts in Central and Northern Illinois, okay? But you guys, you know how you can stretch a maturity or not. I mean, there's going to be a frost sometime, right? So, you know, you don't want to get crazy. But all I'm suggesting is if you can get in the ground earlier than you normally would, and buy normally wood a week, 2 weeks, and there's a good forecast ahead of you, 3 days of warm, dry weather, you know, something like that. That's where I would recommend stretch that maturity out, because it will pay you off in the end. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Nice round.